homeostasis is the balance that your body wants to be in. It does everything it can to be in this state of normalcy and a state of health and well-being. That is what is normal. And so your body, when it starts giving you these symptoms and it starts feeling a little off, those are your warning signs, right? That's the check engine light. Those are the things that are telling you, hey, something is a little off here, and I need you to pay attention, right? It's a request from your body to pay attention. Mm-hmm. And so when that goes ignored for a long period of time, your body just functions as best as it can with whatever it's lacking, or whatever, it's not always lack. Sometimes it's toxins. It's too much of something, right? So whatever imbalance there is, it'll continue on in the best way possible to help you function and live your life. But you're going to have symptoms.
Hey there, welcome to the Female Health Solution podcast, where we discuss women's health, hormones, and everything else in between. Join me as we dive into the tools that you need to live your healthiest life. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Female Health Solution podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Beth Westy. Today, I have Maranda Bower here and we are going to dive into all things postpartum. She is the founder of Postpartum University. Helps create healthcare providers and postpartum professionals worldwide deepen their postpartum experience and transform maternal health through advanced holistic and evidence-based education, focusing on functional nutrition, hormones, nervous system, and perinatal mental health. So I'm so excited to talk about this. So welcome, Maranda.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be here. Yes, all the things.
Yes. So let's just tell me a little bit about yourself. You said, you marked down here, you live in Alaska, you've got 4 kiddos, all that stuff, and just kind of how you got started doing this type of work.
This isn't the work that I ever expected I would do. Like, if you would have asked me when I was a teen if I would be doing this, no, I was going to be a scientist, right? Like, that's what I wanted to do in my world. And thankfully I get to do a lot of that work here. But I had a baby is what happened, right? My 15 years ago, my son is 15 now. He'll be 16 this year, which is insane. But I had my son, and it was the most beautiful experience, yet the most detrimental experience that I have ever had. Like, it wrecked me. And I was the mom who, again, loves science, right? Like that, when I got pregnant, I was like, oh, I got this in the bag, right? Like, I know how to do all the research and the studies. And I was in it. And I had a beautiful home birth. It was just a really wonderful experience all around. And I thought I was really prepared for everything that was about to happen. And I had been a childcare facilitator, a teacher, and I was the director. I ran the facility and the university where we are for almost 14 years. So child education and the science between, raising children basically was my forte. And so I was like, yeah, raising kids, this is what I got. It's going to be easy. I'm going to get it. Yeah, no, none of that whatsoever. None.
The universe heard that and was like, oh, let me show you.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And so I ended up with extreme postpartum depression and anxiety. And I was flabbergasted. I didn't understand why I was in there. I couldn't get out of bed. I was crying on the daily. I felt like I couldn't move. Like, my body just wouldn't work. Nothing worked. I wasn't digesting my foods well. I was losing weight. I'm already a very tiny human being as it is. I was crying with everything. Like, everything was awful. My whole life was falling apart, and I didn't know what to do, right? I've never been in that position. Like, if you're a go-getter, A-type, like ready to take on the world, and then you have a baby and you feel lost, it's like a whole new world. You're like, who am I? How did I get here? What the heck is going on? Right? It's not something that you're familiar with. And sometimes I feel like it takes you out even more.
Yes. That, and I don't know if you felt any of this, but sometimes people will talk about, like, the beautiful experience of having a baby and what a magical time, and you're like, "I feel like a pile of hot garbage. This isn't magical."
Yeah, it's so crazy. I was just chatting with another provider about this, how we oftentimes it's like, "Oh, you're having a baby. It's so beautiful. I'm so excited for you." All the things, right? And then you go into motherhood and you're like, "Hey, bestie, like this is really hard." And they're like, "Welcome to the world. Like now you're a mom." And it's like, deal with it. Of course you don't feel good because you're a mother now and you're a hormonal wreck. And I was hearing this from other women, other moms, my mom, my providers. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, yep, you had a baby. This is what's to be expected. And 15 years ago, y'all, like we didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about anxiety. There was no conversation about rage or OCD. It was kind of taboo. And I was adamant that I would never tell a single soul what was really transpiring inside of me. Because I was so fearful. One, because nobody's talking about this. And I thought if I did say something, then I was an awful mom. It was just, you know, of course, sharing with the whole world that I, Miranda, am a failure. And two, that I maybe I'm going to get my son taken away. If they knew what was really happening inside of me, am I
Yeah.
going to have a kid at the end of this? And what are they going to do for me? Right? They're going to tell me to go to therapy and get some pills. And I can't afford that. And I don't want that in my body. And so it was
Mhm.
like, I'm going to keep this a deep, dark secret inside and I'm going to figure it out myself. And that's what I did. And I don't recommend that story to any, like, don't do this on your own, right? I
Yeah.
learned that the hard way. And and I will tell you, it's so much easier to do it with support. But in my
Mhm.
journey, this is what I needed. And this is how Postpartum University was born because I started doing all of the research. I was deep in the throes, and a lot of the research that I had to look into were no longer, that evidence-based scientific things. I was starting to look into anthropological studies, other cultures around the world, because I was recognizing, wait a second, our science kind of missed the mark. Like they don't even they have nothing really when it came to postpartum. What I thought I researched was like this surface level, honestly, crap. And they have more studies done on postpartum cows than they do on postpartum women. It's just mind
No
boggling, right? Well,
way.
not really, because we know that milk makes money, right? And so
Oh,
therefore a lot of that
right.
money and that research goes into how do we make this cow the best milk producing cow in the world, right? Whatever.
Yeah,
It's not the same for women.
right.
And so the studies were greatly lacking, and today they still are. It's so funny because I'm watching research starting to take hold and like pay attention to postpartum women. Women are starting to demand more. They're asking for more. Providers are stepping in and they're saying, wait a second, what we know is not okay. We're not being told about postpartum. There's a huge gap in our education. We need to seek more support. We need to seek more education. And all of that is wonderful. So science is stepping in and saying, wait a second, we should actually study this. Like, we should study women in postpartum, right? And I'm watching these studies come out saying the most silliest things like when women have more paid time off, they have less postpartum depression rates. It's like, really? I didn't know that. Thank you so much, science. And I'm just like kind of chuckling to myself, like, when do we as women need science to validate everything we already know? Can we please stop with that? Like,
Yes.
you do not need a scientific study to tell you what is going on in your body because, frankly, you already know. And the women before you already know. Traditionally, culturally, we already know. So let's let science play their catch up game. And I'm going to tell you, they are way, way behind. We know far more than they will ever know. And I don't know if they'll ever catch up with what we women already know and understand about the woman's body. They'll figure it out eventually. But in the meantime, let's just pay attention to what we innately know, what tradition and cultures have been telling us for a long time, and get back to this living within our bodies and our means rather than, and I talk about this all the time too. We're so interested right now in biohacking everything. Like that is the thing. Take all the supplements, get this shaking machine, you know what I mean? Like, here's your
Yes.
vitamin D light. As I sit here with my vitamin D light because I'm in Alaska, right? Like I'm not
That's fair. You're in Alaska.
I will tell you, like, some biohacks, cool. I get it. Like
Mhm,
we all there, but we're so eh, trying to biohack every little thing that we're forgetting how to live biologically. And
mhm.
that's something that we need to shift. That's something that we need to change.
Oh, I 110% agree that there's so many. I just read something, was this a few weeks ago? It was something about how the health of children, like just overall health and success of children, in their, early elementary careers and stuff is really dependent on the health and happiness level of the mother. And I was like, duh, because that's the primary
Again,
caregiver.
right? We're
We need a
like,
study for that. We need the
mhm.
numbers.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and I'm gonna share this personal story too. My son has ADHD, and he has some sensory processing, and we knew right away. Like, I knew, and I remember sitting in the doctor's office when he was getting his psych evaluation for
Yeah.
this, and I said, "How much of this is because of my depression?" And he looked at me square in the eye, and this is like the best I sought out the absolute best because let's be real, I was a foster mom. I had lots of kids coming in and out and doing psych evaluations and all the things, and I felt like a lot of what was going on in the industry, especially here, maybe it's where I'm at, was just not okay. It's just kind of crap. So we sought out the absolute best, and he is well versed, and he looked at me and he said, "Probably most of it." And we understand the connection between, ADHD and sensory processing disorders and our children.
Yeah.
And look, I don't know all the answers, but I do know that there is this significant connection, and it is proven scientifically. Like that is one of those connections that we do know.
Yeah.
And if we're seeing the numbers of ADHD and sensory processing going skyrocketing. It's so much so that we've normalized it. Really, we even tell moms how normal it is for them to have it. And
Mhm.
yes, there is some absolute legitimacy to all of that, right? To us experiencing it and our generation, right, which is kind of new for us. I feel like uh, you know, a lot of 30 and 40 something year old women are like, wait a second, I have ADHD. And like they're just now getting diagnosis because we've missed that for a long time. But I also wonder how many women are being misdiagnosed because they're experiencing brain fog and what
Mhm.
generally happens in motherhood when they're not supported. And then when we give them the right tools, a lot of that goes away or significantly decreases. So
Yeah.
it's obviously a very nuanced conversation. We can get into quite a bit on that one, but we know that a mother is deeply connected to their baby, and the way she experiences postpartum is going to shape that child's brain forever.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. And to not have, I wanna say, support, information for the mom or just knowledge to move through this, it can be, like, devastating for your experience
What I've
overall.
what I've really found is that when I say things like this, a lot of times it brings up a lot of shame and guilt and
Yeah.
fear, right? And I'm right there with you. Like I've had this experience. I see it every day in my son, right? I get it. And
Mhm.
a lot of times what I'm seeing is that providers particularly don't want to share that information because they know that it brings upon shame and guilt and frustration and fear.
Yeah.
And I was just
Yeah.
sharing recently, I have a newsletter that goes out every week, and I call it the postpartum half truths. So I was just sharing about how oftentimes we do this in the field we say something that's only half true, where we don't tell the whole truth because we're so scared,
Mm.
because we want to be compassionate. We want to be like, you are okay, right? It's okay. You're not okay. Like, how many times have we heard that phrase? No
Yeah.
way is it okay that you're not okay. Like, are you normal? Yes. Are you going to be okay? Yes. But you deserve support and care. And this situation is not okay, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to be really careful with our language. And we've developed these phrases around breastfeeding, about mental health, about taking care of our baby, about nutrients, like, nourishment and postpartum depletion is my jam. And how often are we telling women that it's okay, right? Your breast milk will be fine if you're not getting everything that you need. It's still the number one. It's still the best. Well, yeah, it's still the best. Like, we gather that, but it can also still be missing some key nutrients, and your baby's not going to get that. And
Yeah.
that's not okay either. But again, we're oftentimes living in these half truths because we don't want moms to feel guilt and shame, because let's be honest, they already feel that enough, like societal pressure, cultural pressure, like the things that we have been led to believe as women, like, and the lack of support, like, it's a lot to hold on our shoulders. Can we even handle some of these truths? And I don't have the answer to that. But I do know that we need to start sharing more of this, and we do need to change the way we care for women in postpartum.
Yeah. Yes. And stop expecting them to bounce back,
Oh, yeah.
in 30
Gross.
days or something.
Gross. Or here, lose all the weight. Like, no, please.
Oh,
Let's not focus
yeah.
on weight loss. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
no. Yeah.
Like
There's
it's
so many things.
yeah, there is. And so I'll share this with you. So, because I have 3 kids myself, and after my first was born, um, I was in grad school at the time and just was very busy, kept going, right? Just was still doing all the things. And within a month, I had lost a ton of weight, like right back to my pre-baby baby weight. And everybody was, "Oh, you look so good. Like, what are you doing? Like, look at you. It's because you're nursing. This is, you've just dropped all this weight, blah, 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 bounced back really well." And I was exhausted. I was completely fatigued. I could not like keep going. And I had gone in for like my postpartum check at 6 weeks, and my OB was like, "You are fine. You're good to go. You're cleared." Because I had had a C-section. And then I started trying to get back to life. And so it was like a couple months later where I had a different appointment at the clinic at my school, and they were going through just kind of like a very thorough history because it was students in the room. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm tired." And they were like, "Oh, really?" And at my OB appointment 2 weeks earlier, they were like, "Oh, yeah, you're a new mom. It's normal to be tired. Of course you're tired." And I was like, "Okay, all right." But I was like, "Yeah, I'm just like, I'm really exhausted." And they were like, "Huh." They're students. So they just kept asking more questions about it. "Well, how exhausted, or what's the thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, like walking from the parking lot into the clinic here, I can't make that all in one go. I have to stop and put him down in the baby carrier and let my arms rest and then keep going." And then they did blood work, and they found out that I was having a thyroid storm,
Hmm.
and that my thyroid went completely kazoo, hyper, which is why I lost all the weight, and then hypo, and everything else. So it was this whole thing where I was suffering for months with being told, "Oh, this is normal for you to feel like crap." And then, but being complimented for how skinny I got, how quickly I got skinny, which did not, like, it didn't feel good, right? Like my eyes were like sunken in. I looked terrible.
I
So,
got goosebumps with you telling that story, right? Like, it
yeah.
says so much about our society and the
Yes.
expectations of
Yes.
of us as mothers. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
And
really
he's
difficult.
18. He's 18. So the time frame that you're talking about
Yeah.
is exactly it. Like being splashed all over, the magazines, the tabloids, and on TV and stuff, where all the celebrities that would bounce back and all these things, and look how much they can get their body back, how quickly after having a baby, all this stuff. that was right? That was me too. So everybody was like, "Oh, look, you're doing such a good job." You know, all these celebrities just had their babies right around the same time you did. Here you go. You're right on target or something.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and the very
terrible.
fact that you were so sick and that you had
Yeah.
something going on. And today, like, again, another example of how we normalize that in mothers, right? It's
Yeah.
30% of women in the first year after having given birth will develop an autoimmune disease.
Yeah. That's crazy,
Mhm. A lot of that will
right?
be thyroid disorder, but
Yeah.
there's so many more. The, gallbladder removal is, like, the number 1 surgery in the postpartum period, having your gallbladder removed. Because your body is struggling immensely with digestion, depletion, all of these things, and your organs are not functioning well at all because they don't have the tools, i.e., nutrition, to support them. And oftentimes we just blame it on hormones. We say, oh, it's your hormones that are out of whack.
Yes.
Actually, your hormones are in a natural biological fluctuation that is completely normal. What is not normal is when they are not supported in the way that they need to be supported, and then they
Mhm.
go completely out of whack. But your hormones are simply messengers. They're just telling you what's happening in your body, right? They're secondary to everything else. So,
Yeah.
nourishment, nutrition is one of the most foundational pieces to all of that. If you're suffering from depletion, your organs are not going to function well. Your hormones are going to be completely out of balance.
Yeah.
You're going to have issues with digestion, right? Because your digestive tract actually physiologically changes after birth. And so if you're not supporting those physiological changes, of course you're going to have gallbladder issues. Of course you're not going to digest your foods. Of course you're going to feel bloated and gassy and maybe even constipated and all of the other things that we say is normal in postpartum.
Yeah. Yes. And I think the with all of these things that you're listing off, I feel like people sometimes just assume or just think, "Oh, well, my body'll it'll just get better on its own. Just give it a little bit of time. It should just bounce back or it just should just regulate on its own." But like you're saying with the nutrient depletion, if you're not getting enough stuff in and you have this dysregulation, it like can't, right? Like,
Yeah, it's not gonna work, and I see oftentimes what women will say is those 2 things, right? Well, it'll just go away eventually, like, I'm not gonna be postpartum anymore, and I can just, I'll go about my life eventually when I finally start sleeping again or whatever the case may be, right? And
mhm,
there might be some truth to that, but I will also tell you that it also becomes your new normal, where it becomes an expectation to live in your body in that way. And I'll tell you a story. I had a client one time who was 9 months postpartum, and she was experiencing a massive range of intestinal issues.
mhm,
And this had happened to me at one point as well. But in her experience, she basically couldn't leave her house until about 11 or 12 noon because her stomach was so upset. And then she would be able to continue throughout her day.
yeah,
And it happened so gradually, so over time, that it just became a normal for her. And so when
wow,
she went to her doctors and her doctor was like, okay, let's, tell me what's going on. And it was like a regular checkup. I remember this scenario happening with myself. It was right before I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. It was a very similar story. And I didn't understand what I was like. It happened over a long period of time, right? And then
mhm,
eventually it just came to be like, I went to my daughter's doctor's appointment and she took one look at me and she said, "You're really sick." I was 82 pounds. And I didn't have a scale at my home, so I didn't know. And it's crazy to me because how many people in my life just did not think once to tell me, right? And I was so used to living in that way that I just thought it was normal. Like my mom had gastrointestinal issues. I grew up with it. Like I had always had issues. I was hospitalized when I was a baby for issues all the time. And so it was kind of like a normal thing a little bit. And then when it came and hit me really hard in postpartum, I was just like, oh, this is just how it goes. Cause it was a gradual increase in symptoms. And she was like, no,
Yeah.
we need to get you in. Like, you need to schedule an appointment. She was the one person who helped me, uncover all of the things that were happening. But so often, this is what we do. We
Yeah.
normalize it over a period of time, right? The other thing that I often
Yes.
see women do is that they say, okay, they, obviously ignore it for some time, but then they decide to, okay, well, if I'm just going to feel this way, so I'm going to just have a bunch of supplements and that'll fix my problem. And I see supplements kind of being the next pill in our society, right? We know how incredibly helpful that supplements can be, but they're meant to be supplemental. They're not meant to be your
Yeah.
key source of nutrients. And we're
Yeah.
actually starting to see a
Yeah.
lot of science come out that says, hey, you know what? Like, taking supplements can actually be really detrimental to your health, especially if you're taking only like one supplement. If you're taking like, oh, I think I'm deficient in vitamin A, or I think I'm deficient in vitamin B's, right? And if you're just taking like one single, what you're doing is you're creating an imbalance because nutrients work together as a whole. If you're not getting one, enough of
Mhm.
one nutrient in your body, likely you're depleted of several key nutrients, right? And especially with moms and postpartum, they're depleted of a multitude. 80% of women who are entering into the postpartum period are already depleted of several key nutrients because it takes so much to grow a human being. And in order to accommodate that growth, you have to really, every meal has to be a conscious effort to increase your nutrient intake. And that's a lot of work, especially in a world that
Yes.
lives really fast. And, it's go, go, go society. We don't have time to sit down and have a meal. And so it's
Mhm.
very challenging. And so when we are entering in the postpartum period, we're already depleted. And yeah, those supplements might work for a little bit, but also they have consequences. And we
Yeah.
are in a world right now where we're so busy and continuing to live a lifestyle that supports depletion and requires supplementation. And that's the problem that we have to address. We have to live
Yeah.
differently in our lives, especially in the years after having a baby. You cannot be in that go, go, go space. You cannot live comfortably without appropriate support, right? It's not ever going
Yeah.
to work. You can try as hard as you can. You might make it for a few months, but you're going to crash. You're going to burn, and it's not going to feel good, right? And
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
yes, we can use supplements to help support us, but we have to do those lifestyle shifts and those lifestyle changes in order to make lasting impact. So that those supplements are just a bonus. They're just an extra. They're not something that your body actually needs in order to live. That's not okay either.
Yes. 100%. The a couple of things that I see really commonly on just labs, things like that, is people who are like, "Oh, I take a vitamin D," but they're still low in vitamin D. They're not getting the blend, because they're just like you said, they're taking just a vitamin D, and I'm like, "You're not taking the K2 or the other fat-soluble
K2,
vitamins
yep.
that help balance out the vitamin
Yep.
D." Yes, like, you're not getting in the right things, or they'll have an absorption issue where I'm like, "I don't care how much you're taking of this one supplement, your body's not absorbing it, so
Or they
you're not
have or they
actually
take a
getting
multivitamin with
it."
iron, right? Or they
Yes.
they take a multivitamin and drink their coffee. And it's like, "No, like, those don't work together," right? Like, you can't do those because now you're just inhibiting absorption. Like,
Yeah.
iron inhibits other key nutrient absorption. Coffee does the exact same thing. So you're basically peeing out money is what I tell my
Yeah.
clients, or pooping out money, like whichever vitamin mineral it is. It's going down the toilet. You're flushing money down the toilet. what's
Yes,
happening.
literally.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Flushing it down the
Say goodbye.
toilet.
Dollar bills.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
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 The other thing I hear a ton from women, and this goes along with the thread of exactly what you're talking about, is I will hear them say all the time, and this is not just like a year later, this can be a decade later, that they will say, I I had my first baby and it went okay, or then I had my second, and I have not been the same since I had that baby. Just no matter what I do, no matter how clean I eat, no matter how healthy I try to be, blah, 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 right? And usually they're trying to restrict things or something like that, right? But they'll say, having this kid, my body changed and it's not been the same. What's wrong with me, etc. Right? So, can somebody's nutrient depletion and things like that be going on for that long a period of time?
Yeah, there's an old saying, and I believe it's thousands of years old, but it's what happens in the first 40 days will affect you for the next 40 years. So, how you experience postpartum is how you're going to experience menopause, which makes sense because look at everybody. I'm going to speak for myself. I'm approaching 40, right? I'm starting to enter into this perimenopause phase. And I see the shifts. I see the changes that are happening into my cycle and how my body is feeling. But I'm also looking at like my mom and what she experienced, right? And like just the people in my life. And I'm like, oh, no wonder, right? Like how the generation before us is really uh and the generation before, like my grandmother was really the one who kind of lost touch with all of the traditional knowledge that we kind of knew, right? Like that was the generation that just didn't have, they basically went to give birth in an assembly line. Like you just literally lined up, here was your meds, and then we're going to get you into that, room when you're next, knock you out, and then a couple days later you'll get to hold your baby, right? Like that was a very normal thing in the United States to do, and we've lost touch with traditional wisdoms and how to care for mothers, and look what they're experiencing, and so now we're going to be the generation that not only changes postpartum in the way our children experience postpartum, but hopefully we'll also be the generation that changes the way we experience menopause, because we're all starting to get there. And then we're going to have like this whole new, like, wait a second, this is not okay either. But really, to your question, like, yes, everything, you know, I also say, like, your body wants to heal, right? It's something called homeostasis in biology, and you know this as a doctor, and your providers listen to this, or know this as well. Like, homeostasis is the balance that your body wants to be in. It does everything it can to be in this state of normalcy and a state of health and well-being. That is what is normal. And so your body, when it starts giving you these symptoms and it starts feeling a little off, those are your warning signs, right? That's the check engine light. Those are the things that are telling you, hey, something is a little off here, and I need you to pay attention, right? It's a request from your body to pay attention. And so
Mhm.
when that goes ignored for a long period of time, your body just functions as best as it can with whatever it's lacking, or whatever, it's not always lack. Sometimes it's toxins, it's too much of something, right? So whatever imbalance there is, it'll continue on in the best way possible to help you function and live your life. And but you're going to have symptoms. And so when we start addressing those root causes, and this is the key, right? You have to really assess those root causes. And if those root causes are not being addressed, and it can't just be like, well, I'm going to focus on nutrition and I'm going to skip nervous system and I'll do nervous system later, right? No. If you're going to digest your foods properly, guess what? You're going to have to focus on regulating your nervous system. You're going to have to address that trauma. You're going to have to address that internal dialogue and the crappy way you're speaking to yourself, right?
Yeah.
All of that is so interconnected into the way, okay, it's all how we nourish ourselves, our thoughts, the way we go through our day, what we put into our body, all of that, right? Like, this is how you nourish yourself.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to these root causes. And when we start addressing those simultaneously together in a complete, comprehensive plan, then you're going to start feeling the effects, and those symptoms are going to fall away. And you're going to be in a state of homeostasis, a state of balance within your body, because that's what it wants. And it will always be there, meaning that you are never stuck. You are never going to be in this place forever. You will do not have to feel awful for the rest of your life. There is a better way, no matter where you are in your postpartum journey.
Yes. Yes. I love that. No matter where you're at in your postpartum journey. Because again, some people think, oh, my kid's 5 years old now. I'm not postpartum anymore. I should be fine. My body should have recovered and, come back around. Enough time has gone by. So just time is enough. And it's not, right? It's
Yeah, postpartum is for life, for one. However, I always say that the body changes for 6 years after giving birth, right? And that's actual scientific. So it takes, yes, 6 to 8 weeks for our uterus to return to its pre-pregnancy state, right? And so we have that one basis that says postpartum, which, by the way, was a very patriarchal model developed by men, right?
yeah.
If you're only postpartum based on the size of your uterus, right? We know as women that is so not true. It takes an upwards of 2.5 years for your hormones to get back to their pre-pregnancy state. And that's not including breastfeeding. That's if you're not breastfeeding, right? So if you're breastfeeding for a year and a half or 2 years or even a year, whatever long you decide to breastfeed, add that on to that. And then you have the brain changes that are occurring, right? So that
Yes.
can go on for at least 3 years, where your brain is literally rewiring itself. We call it mom brain. We know it happens. All of us have experienced it. It is a biological normal, right? Our joints and ligaments take 9 to 12 months to return to its pre pregnancy state. Like, there is so much that is occurring within our body over a period of time. And honestly, we don't feel like we have become a new normal until 5 to 6 years after birth. I was actually just chatting with a provider who does incredible work with fascia. And she was sharing how she's going to send this over to me. I have not seen the study yet, but she has a study that shows how interconnected our cells are with our baby's cells 5 years after having a child. Like, meaning that we can sense what's happening within our child and our child within us for 5 years. Like, that invisible connection between us and our babies exists until 5, and then they start breaking apart and they becoming their own little human being, right? But they require us to regulate their bodies so much so, and we know that scientifically, which is, I think, is just fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
I can't wait to read that study.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. So, for some of the resources and things that you have, and I would love to talk about the Postpartum University that you have, because all this stuff that you've kind of chatted about, is this where people can go to learn more, educate themselves, all of that?
Yeah, so my work is really geared toward providers and professionals, really helping them kind of bridge the gap in their education, because we know that so many of us providers, OBs, nurses, midwives, lactation consultants, this is not part of the education that we receive, right? It's
Yeah.
not part of the traditional ed. You have to go elsewhere in order to get that information. And so that's what Postpartum University is. It's a place to come learn about postpartum nutrition, come learn about perinatal mental health, all of the things that you weren't taught in school. Come learn here. This is where we go. For those of you who might be moms listening in, we have a podcast as well that is geared toward professionals, but I always say, like, you deserve a seat at the table. So come listen in. We talk about all of these things. I have episodes on the gallbladder. I have episodes on depression and anxiety and prevention and health and hormones and nutrition and everything that you can think of. Like, we've been, I think I'm over at like 200 and something episodes now. I don't even know what it is, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Come. We
Yes.
would love to have you.
Oh, awesome. Yes. And I love how you say that, like, everybody deserves a seat at that
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
I love that.
I was the mom who was not the provider. I'm not a provider. I
Yeah.
will never be a provider. I have no desire to be a provider. What you guys do and how you get to where you are, my body would never be able to handle that level of intensity. And I am so grateful for the providers who are out there who are doing this hard work. But I had to learn the hard way and I had to do the
Mhm.
research in a different way. And I think that's what makes my work so invaluable. And to be able to help at this level. I mean, we've trained nearly 1,000 providers in over 50 countries. We've been in business almost 15 years now, so been an incredible journey, and of learning and moving through this, and it's just a beautiful thing to do. So,
Oh, that's fantastic. So, and I know you put a lot of really good information on your social media as well.
oh
So,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
where can people find you, follow you, all that stuff?
Yeah, Instagram at Postpartum University. Our podcast, Postpartum University. Go to our website, Postpartum University. Like, it's super easy. Everything is Postpartum University. If you can remember
Yeah.
that, you will find us on those places. That's where we hang out. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Perfect. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, this has just been so, I want to say so, so, so valuable. And there was actually, um, oh my gosh. This was, I was looking at your social media, stalking you like one does. And it was actually your most recent post where you talked about postpartum depletion isn't just about feeling tired. It's the starting point for the cascade of dysfunction.
yeah,
Like, that phrasing is so powerful to just understand that and say, yeah, it's not just about being tired or whatever. Like, to really say, to not get enough of those nutrients in, it affects how your body can work. So, of course, you're tired. Of course, you don't feel right. Of course, you don't feel good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that is actually a
Mm.
podcast episode, and it was an episode that Holly Stein did of Eat Mama Meals. For those of who might be familiar, she's a good friend of mine, and of course, like, we have to work together in the postpartum world, right? But she did a YouTube video of me and her. She interviewed me for that one. It was a phenomenal episode. So I highly, highly recommend you go take a look at that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a great
Awesome.
one.
Yeah. And then I have another question for you, because this is, I'll say I have sort of my own opinion on this. But what about women who get their period back postpartum while they're still breastfeeding versus women who don't? Like, do you see
Mm,
a big discrepancy with that, or do you know what I mean?
yeah, actually, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So I won't, I'm trying to, like, I will say that we are coming out with an upcoming program that's going to address this and hormones. And so I'm like
Yes.
in research mode here very soon. I'm not there yet because we've got a lot of other projects going on. We've rebranded. We've got lots of fun and exciting things that are happening. So that is
Yeah.
coming up next. That's going to be my next big dive. And so I think there's two things that I see come up frequently when I see that, and it's not just women who are breastfeeding, 6 months after and then getting their period back. It's like women 6 weeks and seven
Yeah.
weeks postpartum getting their period back. And I think
Mhm.
there's a huge discrepancy in what's happening within their hormonal cycle that is
Mhm.
triggering their body to think that it's an appropriate time to start their period.
Yeah.
Um, and I have also seen the argument that their body is well enough to now carry another child, which I don't think is true, right? And I can't wait to discredit completely. Um,
Yeah, ooh, well
yeah,
enough.
we know
Ah.
that's not true, right? We know. So there is some sort of hormonal issue. So if there and
Yeah.
this is how my brain works is
Mhm.
okay, what is the hormonal issue, right? And so we start looking at this is the where my brain will go. We'll start looking at the hormones, what's in balance, what's out of balance, what are we seeing? Start talking to
Mhm.
other providers like yourself who's been in it. Like this will be a long process for me.
Yeah,
And then start looking at, okay, hormones are messengers. Okay. So
yeah,
where are they picking up? What is if this hormone is producing too much, right? Estrogen dominance, like why does estrogen dominance exist? Right. And so we start going down the path there. What nutrients are needed there? What's nutrients are being provided there? What about toxins that are coming into the body mimicking estrogen? You start looking at all of those components, and if we're looking at progesterone, is it not enough? That's there, right? And so we
yeah.
can look at, okay, what makes that? How do we go through and dive deep into each and every one of those components? And of course, that's going to branch into like 15 different things in and of itself, right? But that's
Yes.
how you go through the research process, which is a very long, inundated, exciting process.
Yes.
Yeah, as a biologist, like that's my thing. So
Yeah,
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 but
absolutely.
I'd love to hear your opinion.
Oh,
Can I ask
yeah.
you that?
So
Yeah,
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 absolutely, absolutely, and this just comes from, I'm gonna say, personal and clinical experience.
the best.
So that's why I call it just a pure opinion,
Yeah,
right? And so this I'll just, I use myself and, like, my family as an example a lot of times, and then I'll use, like, good friends of mine that also come from larger families, things like that, that, again, I know them, I know their health habits, I know all this stuff, right? So, I have 2 sisters. I was raised Catholic, so I have a big Catholic extended family, like, tons of cousins and tons of, aunts and, like,
same.
second cousins,
Raised
all the stuff,
raised
right?
Catholic, huge
Yes.
family. Got it.
Huge family, right?
Yes.
Like, there's a small town in Wisconsin that I'm literally related to, like, half the town. Like, that's
Love it.
Yep, but with everybody in my family, and this wasn't something that I really cared about until, like, I started having kids and my sisters, we started having kids around the same time, and it was the same thing for my mom and her sisters, so all of them had babies within a year apart. Like, there's 3 of us siblings that are, like, 1 year apart, right? 1 year, 1 year, 1 year apart, and, um, for all of my sisters, we all got our periods back within 4 to 6 weeks of each of our births.
Mm.
Same thing for all of, like, literally my aunts, my cousins, my second cousins, my, like, everybody. And I'm like, I think there is just a genetic component. Now, did I have other issues? Thyroid stuff was everybody being perfect nutritionally? I mean, no, not necessarily. But I have other friends that they've done everything, you know, with nutrients, with getting rest, with taking time postpartum. And as long as they're breastfeeding, they don't get a period back. And I'm like, yeah, and they're like, yeah, that's the same thing that happened with my mom. And, there are other female family members that they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so I think that's, can be a factor in it. I mean, I'm not saying that's like the only thing, but I do know that there are, a lot of hormonal things are genetically related, genetics, epigenetics, right? That whole debate. But there are some things with that where I do think some women just while they're breastfeeding and they still get continually depleted, so they won't get their period back versus, oh, I'm doing everything. I'm doing all the right stuff. I'm getting a ton of nutrients in. I feel really good. Why isn't my period coming back? And then as soon as they stop breastfeeding, like at 6 months, they get their period back. Yeah. But again, it's not everybody. And so that's my sort of like opinion or theory based off
I
of,
love that. Thank you for
I,
sharing. Yeah,
yeah.
it's such a complex conversation, right? And there's
Yes.
so many different
Yeah.
avenues in which to go to. And like you
Hmm.
you brought it up, like that, yes, there's likely a genetic component. I love that. And then
Yeah.
there's like, okay, what part is genetics and what part is the lifestyle that we have created because we live in a family and we share so many of the same similar life patterns, right? That we've grown up
Yes.
with, right? That's the epigenetic part, right? And then we could just go down the line of like trying to segment and find all of these pieces and then put them back all together again to
Yeah.
paint the story. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do know women that with just on that thread to just say, I know so many women that they've thought, I'm super healthy going into this. They took 2 years to prepare their body for a solid pregnancy. They had a great pregnancy experience. They had, a good postpartum experience, and then they feel bad that they didn't get their period back right away. And I'm like, don't feel bad. Like, did your mom, right? Did your cousins, did your, family members? It might, it's not your fault type of thing. Do you know what I mean? But again, this kind
Yeah.
of circles
Yeah.
back to what you were saying at the beginning about the whole postpartum thing and the guilt and the shame that we
Yeah,
get
it's like if we become
scrutinized
a
with.
mom and then it's immediate, like, this is your new guilt. Here's your bag of
Yes.
guilt. Here's your bag of shame. Carry it along with your baby. Like, don't drop
Yeah.
it. Like, seriously, it's so much. And
Yeah.
we've got to stop blaming ourselves. We just got to release even the hard things, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially the hard
Absolutely.
things.
Yes.
Woof, too much to hold.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I super appreciate your time and all the information in this. I think this is just an amazing conversation. So, we're going to put everything in the show notes here for people to find you, follow you, learn more about the Postpartum University, and just dive into that type of work with you because I think this type of thing is not well known near enough. And so many women do need the support overall. So,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Thank you so much for having me here. And I know that I have you in my schedule so that you
Yep.
will be on our podcast here soon too, which is also going to be super exciting. I can't wait for that conversation.
Yeah, me too. All right, awesome. So, yeah, you guys don't hesitate to reach out to Miranda at any time. Like if you find her, follow her. I'm just telling people this. We didn't talk about this, but
No, it's true. I answer
reach out to
personally.
her.
I answer personally in my DMs. So if you find
Yeah,
me on Instagram, like DM me and you will hear from me directly.
yeah, perfect. All right. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. If you would like more information, just head on over to drbethwesty.com for all the show notes and information from today's episode. And if you're looking for more community, more support, you can find and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and I would love to see you there.